listening the session. Now, we would like to move on to the next session, where we have Professor Dr. Yana Wengel, Associate Professor, Hainan University, Arizona State University Joint International Tourism College from Hainan University, China. Professor Yana will be talking on the overtourism in outdoor spaces. I would like to take the opportunity to welcome and thank Professor Yana Wengel from China, and would like to read a brief bio on her. Dr. Yana Wengel is an associate professor at the Hainan University. She takes a critical approach to tourism studies. Her interest includes volunteer tourism, tourism in developing economics, creative research methods, and mountaineering. Her dissertation examined the social construction of host-guest experience in farm tourism exchange program. Our current project examines issues of mountaineering tourism, focusing on the 7 summits challenge. Yana is interested in creative methodologies for data collection and stakeholder engagement. She is a co-founder of LEGO Serious Play Research Community. It is my immense pleasure to welcome Professor Yana Wengel on our virtual platform. Dear audience, Professor Yana Wengel, thank you very much.
So thank you very much. I would like to confirm if you can hear me, because I have a little construction on this side and I hope it's loud.
Okay, yes.
Hear me well?
Yes, Professor Yana, I can hear you. It just you need to, I think, be a little bit closer to your microphone.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll try to be louder. Let me share the screen before we start.
Yeah, I'll confirm you once we can see the screen.
Sharing the screen. And
yes.
1 second. Share the other screen. Just now. But do you see the slides without any notes and everything? I'm just mindful that I'm sharing the correct screen.
I can see the slide. It just your microphone is breaking down. Are you using open speaker or you are using any headphone?
I have my laptop microphone. Is it not enough?
No, it's enough, but it's just breaking down. There's some disturbance. I mean, it's not the noise from the outside, but we can hear half of the times, and the rest of the times we can't hear. I mean, can you give a go?
I'm afraid this might be the internet connection from China.
Yeah,
as you know,
probably. Yeah,
we have some different connections.
Okay, no problem. Nevertheless, we can understand what is going on. So please continue with your slide. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me here to give this talk. I think I chose this topic because it's my personal and academic interest in terms of the outdoor spaces. But as I was talking last week to my students, it's somewhat unusual to talk about the tourism in the times where we are actually not knowing how the tourism is going to proceed, how it's going to take off, and so on. Since the 2020 is mainly tourism is on hold in the nations. However, we do see some signs of the positive domestic tourism development in some of the countries. And I think China is a very good example of how the tourism can contribute to the economy even in the COVID times. Because last week we had our famous annual Chinese holiday called Golden Week, and many newspapers around the world reported that numbers of the domestic tourism are quite high. And what is surprisingly to see for many of us is that actually many people opted out to go into the outdoor spaces. Chinese tourists are famous for different tourism trends like going to shopping destinations, cultural destinations, and so on. But outdoor destinations are increasing in popularity also due to the pandemic situation, because many of the areas allow social distancing. On the internet and the newspapers recently, we did saw overcrowded images of some very popular outdoor destinations like in Yunnan or in the Yellow Mountains. But actually, it really depends on where you go and where you travel. So just let me start with the presentation, and we will continue. So in the recent years, tourism saw constant growth, and popularity of the city tourism was also growing enormously, mainly due to the shift from the packaged traditional vacations, sea sand, and sand holidays, which were very popular in Europe around 1970s, 1980s, towards more educational experiences, sometimes called the 3 E's: the education, the experience, and the entertainment. And of course, cities offer very good opportunity for all these 3 types of tourism. They are all with their archaeological and historical artifacts. There is enough to experience in terms of food and different shows and traditions of the particular culture, but also the entertainment. So in 2013, the mass tourism in some parts of the world was confronted by the resident resilience and the public protests over what has come to be known overtourism. I guess the term is kind of self-explanatory, and overtourism is also accompanied with the term tourismophobia. The major newspapers in Europe made the headlines around these 2 issues. And what is interesting, I guess, this reflects the challenges of the managing growing tourism flows to urban destinations, and also the impact of the tourism on cities and the residents. In the essence, we are talking about the absence of the good management in some parts and also uncontrolled development. With increasing tourist numbers, especially in the European trips, tourism must be developed and managed in a sustainable way, both for visitors and the local communities. But again, a few years ago, we saw how this is not happening. And that is very hard when it comes to labeling the overtourism. I guess if I were to explain it shortly, overtourism is about right balance. This image is one of the very famous images from the UNWTO by highlighting several ways in why tourism is important and why we see how many tourism, the destinations related to tourism, the main mean of income, how they suffer from lack of tourism. I found this map while preparing to this presentation. As you can see, this map has a lot of destinations in Europe, many destinations in Asia, and I guess if we were from some other countries, we could name some other destinations. And this map was not created by an academic, it's created by one individual on their blog. But for sure, speaking of the overtourism outdoors, Argentina, which is the home to the highest mountain in South America, Mount Contragor, can be labeled as an outdoor overtourism destination. If we talk about the definition of overtourism, I like the definition of the responsible tourism, which says that the overtourism describes destinations where hosts and guests feel that there are simply too many people at one place, and that the quality of life as well as the quality of experience is deteriorated, unacceptable. And this is how we see that the residents started to protest around the overtourism. And now I'm just going to show you several images. Probably many of you have seen them in newspapers a few years ago. So this picture is taken in the central Barcelona on a street which is very popular with short-term weekend city trippers. And actually, this place used to be a vegetable and fruit market for local people about 8 years ago. But on this image, maybe you can see that some of their, the majority of their kiosks and places are selling the postcards calendars, magnets, they're selling shoes, they're selling cut fruit. So you cannot buy just a kilo of bananas, but you can buy a box of fruit cut for tourists to consume on the go. So all the experience of this place is centered around tourists, and locals actually don't go there anymore because they don't need magnets, they don't need postcards, they don't need pre-cut fruits. So it's a different things what locals and tourists need. This image is taken at a very famous fountain in Rome, and again the situation is the same. In the past, it used to be a square, San Antonio Square, where the tourists when the locals enjoyed to have their afternoon coffee and reading the newspaper, and now it simply looks like this. Well, not now, just before the COVID times. And I wonder who is enjoying the experience. Tourists coming, of course, to see the fountains, the nice location, the setting, but locals don't come to this place anymore. And of course, there are many tourists who just cannot even take a picture of the place because it looks so crowded. The next one, Amsterdam. Amsterdam in Netherlands got very famous and very successful in promoting city tourism. And actually now they are taking effective steps to minimize overtourism because simply as the other people, they got too many tourists. So the destination was overcrowded by the day trippers, by the people coming for the short weekend trip and staying a few days in the central Amsterdam. So if we talk about other outdoor destinations, we see that also the sacred places are now not protected from overtourism. And indeed, this location is in Myanmar in the city of Bagan. Although the overtourism started as a city destination, there are many examples in Asia. Bali and Komodo Island in Asia, which are predominantly outdoor spaces, El Nido and the Boracay Beach in the Philippines, again outdoor destinations. Kyoto in Japan, that would be considered city tourism. Jeju Island in South Korea, Halong Bay in Vietnam, Maya Bay, Bagan, like this picture, Akong Ward in Cambodia. So there are many destinations around Asia, and China probably have hundreds of outdoor destinations subject to overtourism, just because Chinese have very high dense population, and due to some historical and cultural facts, Chinese move around the country twice a year in their full moon, spring festival, and the golden week in October, the autumn festival. So that's when we see Chinese people traveling, or majority of Chinese people traveling. So this picture is taken in Australia, and it's Mount Urululu, which is a sacred mountain to a local Aborigine population. And fortunately for the national park, the cultural preservation, the climbing Mount Urululu was prohibited in 2009, just before COVID, and the government has created several plans to protect the mountain and the impact of overtourism. Because believe me or not, this mountain actually used to have a metal poles and chains at some of the dangerous places for an ordinary tourist to visit. So, surprisingly, overtourism is not a new problem. The challenge of the managing tourism is famous for the details. However, in the past, researchers got mainly interested in the problem, and one of the first reports comes from the 70s, which is questioning the constant growth. Another concept of Kotler's demarketing coming from the 70s, and in the 80s it was applied to tourism. So there are several works from prominent tourism scholars who studied the issue of carrying capacity, overcrowding in the past. The only difference with the overtourism is that it has very strong component of participation of the local residents, where the local residents go on the streets and protest about tourism and tourism development. And like you can see on the image on the right, this is a picture from Barcelona, and you see tourists taking a picture of the beach on the side of the famous photo now protest saying that tourists or your luxury trip to Barcelona is my daily misery because local people cannot come and enjoy tourism, or they cannot come and enjoy their local beach. So what brings over tourism to destinations, urban destinations and to outdoor destinations? Well, first of all, the propensity to consume travel, to experience other people's places. And among the emerging middle classes, they contribute to over tourism. And if we think of the countries with high density of population and the emerging middle class like India and China, there are millions of people traveling domestically and internationally. So over-tourism is not only a European phenomenon, it extends to Asia and many other countries. So one of the reasons for the destination or for the over-tourism development is a low cost of travel or transportation. Transport is larger in scale than it was 10 years ago. The aircrafts, the buses, high-speed trains, and of course the cruise liners, they deposit more passengers with each arrival, and they arrive more often. And it's very difficult for the destination to manage it because usually transport part of tourism is managed by the different authorities than, for example, destination management, marketing organizations, DMOs. So the low cost of travel and the rise of the budget airlines, for instance, in Europe, made it easier for people to pay the price for their journey. And in UK, there was a case of kind of marketing which was taken down by the authorities. It advertised that alcohol in UK is quite expensive in the pubs, and one of the airline companies advertised that you can fly to Poland to drink beer over the weekend, and it will cost you less than to go out one day in UK. But eventually this advertising was taken down. Promoting alcohol is not a good idea anyway. So low cost of travel. Number 4, which is pretty important, the public realm is free. So many cultural destinations are like monuments, squares, fountains, even some museums, they are free in many destinations. Seasonality is another factor of over-tourism. And in European summer months, June to August, many countries have school holidays, so many people travel to the cities and they travel outdoors. This determination and the P2P, peer-to-peer platforms like Airbnb, they created a huge problem for over-tourism, huge problem in housing market. They are forcing up the rents and displacing those from low incomes from the popular destinations, and whole residential neighborhoods suffering from tourism. Airbnb and other portals have seen some restrictions recently, just before the pandemic, when the country started to address over-tourism issues, especially in the urban areas. And let's hope that those will be controlled in a better way in the future when the travel will resume in one or another way after the pandemic. So tourists actually don't pay for being in a famous square or standing next to a famous monument. All the maintenance and the repair costs, they are met by the local taxpayers. And this is one of the intangible impacts on the local economies. And if we think of the outdoor environment, which is fragile and increased numbers of tourists traveling to those environments, actually the maintenance or the repair cannot be made in nature in some places, and we'll see a few examples. Another problem is the honeypot destinations, because they are very difficult to the market, and tourists are motivated to travel to see one of the famous sites, to collect the selfie, to post about their experience being in some particular destinations. And this is how the bucket list, promoted, for instance, by travel guides like Lonely Planet and Red Guide and so on, and also the influence of the bloggers and social media celebrities, this is how it creates popularity. One of the famous European images, the blue roofs and the white houses of Saloniki in Greece. I actually had recently an experience by a colleague who went there for her wedding anniversary. So they married 20 years ago in Greece, and tourism was different at the time. And she said that it was quite amusing being a tourism academic to spend time at the pool or time somewhere in the city to observe how some people bring a lot of cameras, a lot of outfits, different types of hats, accessories, and makeup, and spend hours and hours to take a perfect picture with the background of this iconic image. So all of these kinds of things, they stimulate the overtourism because everyone wants to be. What is important about overtourism is that it's totally opposite to the experiential travel. Cities like Barcelona, Amsterdam, Venice are the top 3 worst cities for the overtourism because there were simply too many people and not enough infrastructure to accommodate the tourists and the residents. And the residents are slowly getting pushed out of the cities, and they are having to live elsewhere because the prices are rising and getting high. The local shops are disappearing, and house owners are making more profit by renting accommodation out. But if you would think that it's a phenomenon only related to tourism, it's not true. Several comments and reports were made, for example, around iconic national parks in the United States. And we talk about the areas around Colorado, the Yellowstone, the Red Canyon National Parks, where the whole communities have moved to sell land, which is further being developed for resorts and holiday homes. So the question is, what will happen with those places in the 50 years? Will the culture be totally lost, like the local culture, and will it be replaced by the tourism consumer effect? Well, a few years ago we thought it's going to be like that, but interestingly now with the COVID, we cannot say for sure because we don't know how tourism will develop and what is going to happen. But if we think of the outdoor destinations, we can see examples from the Thailand and the Philippines where the whole islands were shut down due to the damage to the environment and the biodiversity, and it was because of too many tourists. So why it's important to distinguish the overtourism and the experiential tourism? I think because specifically destinations who are noticing overtourism and started to notice overtourism in outdoor spaces, they should seek and invest more in the key factors which highlight experiential travel. So if we speak of outdoor locations, it's not about picture taking, but people sometimes are seeking memorable experience and they embark on a hike or they take a trip on a boat or canoe. It is important to allow tourists to engage in cultural, community, or environmental initiatives to help make tourism destinations more sustainable. And experiential tourism is a shared product where host and guests can interact for a longer period of time. For instance, my host guest farm research in New Zealand pointed out that farmers cannot travel a lot because they have to take care of the farm, and they enjoy hosting usually young backpacker type of tourists and listen to their stories. And people were saying that we travel through the stories of these young people who travel because otherwise they cannot travel. And this kind of quality, deep experience create memories, and quite often those experiences can be transformational for hosts and for the guests if they're done and managed in the right way. And also the experiential tourism can be associated with something what is called slow tourism. So I guess if the destinations were to focus on the experiential travel and the promotion of certain activities, that would be one way to minimize the impact of the outdoor the overtourism. So what can be done to manage the overtourism in some destinations? So far, limiting the transportation options was quite successful, where, for example, cruise ships were banned to arrival in Dubrovnik. It was limited to 2 cities, 2 ships per day. The accommodation platforms were regulated. Some of the destinations got more expensive and they targeted more money. Better the marketing and education of locals and the tourists, collaborations among the stakeholders involved in tourism, and it looks like some parts of Barcelona and Amsterdam have achieved some success in minimizing the impact of tourism over tourism. Protected the crowded areas, especially if we talk about the outdoor destinations. And one of the interesting things is technology, which can help us to match the supply and demand by using the time ticketing, dynamic pricing, application platforms, coupon system, and so on. I think in Asia, or at least what I see from China, Singapore, maybe parts of Japan and Hong Kong, there are some of the discounts and the coupons which are popular also with international tourists, which allow you to enter to place and attraction to a different time from the majority. And in those examples, it was usually a little bit cheaper as well. So if we think what tourists can do, well, there is actually a bunch of things what tourists can do. And some advices were given to search out original alternatives. For instance, the American National Parks launched a campaign, 20 less visited national parks, and it has some success. Visit during the off-peak hours, just as mentioned, and during the off-peak seasons. Support the local community with time and money by staying longer, by buying the local producers, by eating in the local cafes and not in the chain restaurants and so on. Exploring and going beyond the hot spots. Sometimes when taking a local guide, and I can talk from my experience in China, in Yunnan, which I've done this August with my family. Many people traveling to Yunnan go to places like Dali and Lijiang, famous for cultural tourism and for mountaineering tourism, where you can travel by a cable car to nearly 4,600 meters. But actually, if you go to the second popular mountain, you will see all because those overcrowded destinations where the buses of tourists are coming and roaming through the national park, you kind of travel with one group to the national park. But if you were to travel to least popular destination, you will have it all to yourself. Of course, being an eco-friendly and responsible traveler is important, and visiting some of the destinations. Well, again, those destinations are listed in number 6. They were kind of on the off-peak bucket list pre-COVID travel. So nowadays, we don't really know what's going to happen with many parts of it. So in 2018 alone, the Grand Canyon and Great Smoky Mountains in the United States received 6 and 11 million people visitors. A similar situation is happening in China as well. It is increasingly incredible to see that so many people take an interest in the natural wonders of our planet. One might assume that opting for a vacation oriented around nature makes it more sustainable, but actually taking friends, families to national parks encourages more impact on the destination, especially if the destination becomes popular like the So moderation and balance again is key here because we want to preserve these natural treasures for the generations to come. The impact of the overtourism may bring the determinal results to some of the most iconic destinations on our planet. Overtourism is essentially the concept of recognizing the environmental and the cultural effects that derive from the excess of tourists and the crowd in a particular destination. And if we can control it in the city setting, in the urban setting, if we can repair the pathway or we can repair the monuments and maintain them, it's very hard to make some repairs on nature, and it does cost money sometimes. So Iceland got recently very successful in promoting itself, and the numbers grew exponentially over the last decade. And now Iceland has launched a campaign of traveling to some of the less famous places. Again, the way of doing the demarketing. I think this place in Thailand, many of you know, that's the Maya Bay, which was filmed in the 1990s in the film The Beach, Leonardo DiCaprio. It became so popular that since 2018 it's closed. And I just checked yesterday, the recent note is that it is estimated to reopen in the middle of 21. So one part of it is pandemic, and the other part of this development is just that the nature needs to relax a little more. You will think that people don't go to extreme places. Well, they actually do go, and like you can see those two people in the background just here, two people in the red, they are standing very, very close to penguins. And you know what are they doing there? They are actually breeding. So penguins don't come ashore just for fun. They're just coming there to do what is meant to be done by nature, procreate, to breed, but tourists do disturb because there are too many cruise ships coming from Chile and some of the South Africa. No trek is too hard. Very famous ancient location, Machu Picchu in Peru. Many people are there, and many reports of people who are unfit to be there still coming. What did we see in the recent 2 to 3 years? Many of you will recognize that. Overtourism, over 7,000 visitors. Too many mountaineers, too many sherpas, too many support staff coming to the mountains. This picture is about the Blue Mountains in Australia, which received about 30 million domestic tourists in 2016-17, and the population of this area beyond the national park is actually very little. Same as happening in Scotland. Scotland has about 5 million people, and just before the virus, the number of tourists was about 14 million visitors. So triple amount of the local residents who are spread in the majority of the cities, but those 14 million people, they visit the nature destinations, the outdoor destinations. So what are the challenges? I think same as in the urban areas, which are usually prepared for the human impact, the natural environments are more fragile and they need more protection from tourism. So it does challenge the local residents. The tourism experience can be degraded if you can see too many pictures in front of the mountain you want to photograph, and you need to wait. The infrastructure is overloaded. The resources are depleted, biodiversity is impacted, and of course it does threaten the culture and the heritage of those destinations. So let's have a look. What are the impacts? So certain destinations experience large influxes of visitors on the daily basis. Many of the tourists, like in the Blue Mountains and parts of the Scotland, they actually don't overnight. They just travel during the day, and then they travel to another destination, and they travel back to the hub. They are leaving natural ecosystems and societies the permanent impact. Aside from the contributing to increased water consumption, air pollution, litter, and other waste products surrounding social environment is left to face displacement and reduction in resources. This doesn't seem sustainable at all, right? Although it happens in outdoor settings. So over-tourism outdoors means more delays in the roads. It means more delays on the hiking trails and more people in the restaurants, interface inside and the outside of the trash pollution, of course, plastic bottles, sandwich wraps, they're all left sometimes not in trash bins provided by the Department of Conservation, but just lie on the ground. And we all know what happens if animals consume the plastic. That in numerous cases of fish, marine creatures wrapped in plastic. there is more foot traffic, regardless of whether it's happening inside of the area where there are many animals or biodiversity. But it means that the trails will be worn down and it will be harder for the nature to take. Also, there is noise pollution from the voices and overall presence of more people in a destination. So when the place becomes too popular, the real estate companies and developers replace low-income housing with high-end resorts. This displaces the residents around the national park, especially who lived there before making room for temporary. The local dry cleaners become cafes. The corner shops sell convenience food. They turn into 7-Eleven shops. And some of these cafes and some of the food sold in those areas becomes too expensive for local residents. But real estate price surrounding the popular outdoor destinations is rising. So sometimes the owners sell, and then these homes are converted into vacation or resorts. And this is a very prominent problem around the most popular national parks in the United States. Similar is happening in Nepal. In states, you can also see how the culture of Native American tribes, which is located close to some of the national parks, you can see how it's been commercialized and sold, and how some of the fake artifacts and the tribal jewelry and art is sold. It has actually nothing to do. We can see that animal behavior is changing, and I know that in some of the Asian contexts, for instance in Myanmar, around the temples, and in some places in Thailand, China, monkey behavior is changing. Because naturally there are a lot of monkeys. What tourists do, they feed monkeys. What locals do, they sell some food to feed monkeys, and monkeys are actually quite dangerous to attack the tourists, to attack children with ice creams and trying to steal things out of your backpack. So those animals are most likely to depend on humans to survive. And one of the, I think, most astonishing examples I saw in person is the eagle safari in Langkawi Island in Malaysia. So you travel by a small fishing boat where the boat driver throws away some meat, which is sometimes rotted meat, and then the eagles come to get the meat. Tourists take pictures, they are happy, but actually the scientists highlight that eagles are starting to relearn hunting. And what will happen if there is no tourists like now? Maybe they are starved to death already, who knows? So the hidden costs of outdoor overtourism on outdoor spaces include increased greenhouse gas emissions, the ecosystem maintenance costs, the cost of the renewable energy, the water resources, waste management, especially we talk about toilets not being available everywhere, social cultural restoration, and the maintenance. And I would like to give you an example of this picture. If I would speak in the class, I would ask my students, I risked it and what is that? But it's a picture from the Lord of the Rings trilogy in New Zealand. Canyon, the river, where the CGI technology created on the left and the right is how it looks in reality. So it's just a spot on the New Zealand map. And actually with the GPS technology, tourists started, like the fans of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, they started to travel to some outdoor locations. And some of those locations, they were not branded or marketed as a film-induced tourism. So this describes an example of how Lord of Rings affected the local environment by making some locations around New Zealand are very busy, because people just need GPS, and there were traffic jams, there was litter, there was pollution, and I guess again, overtourism is something that describes rapid change in tourism supply and demand that are created an oversupply of high volume and short stay people, because in New Zealand context, the Lord of Rings fans, they just come for a picture. But actually, some parts of this can be dangerous. So if you can see the picture, which is called Mount Doom, so it's that picture. In 2019, 50-something-year-old Chinese tourists died. And this is a pretty easy mountain for someone who is sporty and athletic, but it can be crucial. It can kill someone who is maybe more senior in age and not that fit. And also, some people go there without the guide. So actually, outdoors can kill you. And some tourists still don't realize that because nature or tourism in nature is a lot different, especially if you're one-on-one and you're unprepared. So, how are some of the things are addressed? Well, limiting Airbnb rentals, repackaging the standalone destinations, branding new, banning new tourism businesses or tourism shops from opening in some of the city or the outdoor destinations can help. And we can see some of the positive examples, like I mentioned previously, Barcelona and Amsterdam, which have done. In terms of the nature, Philippines was the first country or first famous case I know of where the whole island was shut. The Boracay was shut because the water is known to be clear, and the coral reefs were built with exotic fish and marine wildlife. They actually got built with the green algae, and it was illegal to fish and pollute. It was illegal to go snorkeling in some parts of it, but snorkeling contributed to 70 to 90% of destruction of the coral reef. So there were too many tourists and too many accommodations on this small island, which was inadequate. The infrastructure was not enough to handle sewage, to handle sanitation, garbage, and the pollution. It was not enough to handle the food impact, the food mileage, because many tourists from Western countries went to resorts, and many foods have to be imported to the island. Similar situation is happening on Cook Islands, on Rarotonga. The majority of food for the restaurants is imported to the island because our island is so small to produce enough for tourists to accommodate tourists. So the reservations to enter the area, to enter the outdoor area, national parks, temporal closure, promotion of less visited destinations could work out. One of the famous tourist guides, Fodor, which is the world's largest English language travel guide, began publishing no-go lists, referencing the concerns about tourism destroying the world's best places. So in 2018, just before the COVID, they featured Galapagos Islands and parts of Thailand as places that you don't want to visit because the government is trying to combat overcrowding. They discouraged travel to the places like Bali and Angkor Wat in 2020, so before the virus they created the list. And from the 13 destinations on the no-go list, 8 places were outdoor locations. And some of the places like Matterhorn Mountain in Alps was also labeled as a place that would kill you. Because in 2019, the 7 climbers in Switzerland lost their life, and the Matterhorn took 11 lives. Another people took 11 lives. In total, about 20 people. Because people inexperienced or less experienced to go to these mountains, they're still there. But actually, it's unsafe and dangerous for a tourist to climb the mountain. This is what we are trying to investigate in our recent project with my colleagues from Poland on what kind of people do travel to high altitude mountain destinations and what kind of impacts they bring there. One of the famous tracks or one of the famous outdoor destinations is, of course, Everest Base Camp. And many people imagine as a journey of solitude. It is fairly difficult track for many people, but actually it's very difficult to someone of the moderate fitness skills. And unfortunately, one of the impacts on this type of tourism on this is insurance fraud. So Nepal had a lot of cases recently of the tourists calling on the helicopter rescue. And there are accounts of where tourists knew that they are going to go one way, but to take a helicopter ride back from the Everest Base Camp track because they couldn't be bothered to go on foot back because the Everest track is like you go same way back and forth. And there were cases in the media and in our academic community on the insurance fraud that actually it has a very bad negative image highlight on the good insurance companies, on the good tourism companies which provide decent service, where some of the tourists were actually not strong enough to travel or not strong enough to experience altitude. Because on Everest track, you can cross altitude of about 4,000 meters, depending on the way you go. And of course, many people cannot handle that. So some of the outdoor destinations should be off limits to some. So if we talk about some other outdoor destinations and the way they're managed, I'm always making a joke that you don't know overtourism if you didn't travel in China during the February festival or during the autumn holiday. This is a picture of a beach near the Shenzhen, on the other side of the Hong Kong border. So it's called Dameisha Waterfront Park. It's a very short stretch of sand, about 2 kilometers. It opened around 99, and this is just a picture of a summer weekend. So to make the tourist experience more enjoyable, several measures were introduced. They created the RSVP system. They tried to manage overcrowding by managing the amount of people who can enter the beach to enjoy the place. And actually, if you look up the reviews of the Dameisha Waterfront Park, many people say go there in winter, or never come during the weekend, never come during the holiday time, because simply too many people would like to go to this location. So what is happening to nature in the COVID? Like I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, that tourism is on hold everywhere, but actually we see that tourism is coming back, domestic tourism is coming back in many countries. In New Zealand, parts of Australia, in all China, there are many tourists nowadays. And in the beginning of the virus, let's say for the rest of the world, because in China, around the April time, the virus was kind of under control, the Guardian published this article on the right. And not only the Guardian. Cities have shut down, people went in lockdown, but the world has seen the coyote on the streets in San Francisco, peacocks dancing in Mumbai, wild boars roaming in Barcelona, resurgence of bees and the rare wildflowers in UK, other animals reclaiming the human spaces. And actually, it's suggested that it's not entirely good. While it can be uplifting to see how nature recovers and some sea turtles laying eggs on a tourist-free beach in Thailand, it is clear that actually nature is under greater threat than before in many places. The devastating loss of jobs from tourism, from people employed in the tourism worldwide, especially in developing countries, means that the lack of financial support for sustainable tourism is there. So the national parks and protected areas don't have money from the tourism. Also, tourists disappearing from popular hotspots give the opportunities to illegal activities. So, for example, the poachers are hunting in jaguars in Latin America. Illegal logging is happening now in Cambodia. There have been several reports of fishermen taking advantage of the drop of the enforcement of waters in Indonesia. Koh Tao in Thailand was reported to have many more fishing boats because divers are gone. But at the same time, in terms of domestic tourism, outdoor destinations are becoming more popular because social distancing is COVID. And the COVID outbreak showed the positive impact of nature on people. And actually, psychologists discussed that COVID shows that cities need to invest in more green spaces. So the severe impact of the coronavirus pandemic on the tourism industry is not a secret. And many wonder that how the situation will change and what it will bring. But there are several trends for sure emerging in some countries. People travel local, they choose the locations for social distancing. People travel to nature, they have micro holidays, and they embark on the road. So there are several trends are already.
Professor Yana, are you with us? Professor Yana, are you with us?
Hello?
Yes, Professor Yana.
I'm sorry, there was some problem with the connection, but actually it was nearly the last
Yep.
slide. Let me share the screen again.
Okay.
So just to wrap it all up, what could be some of the solutions? I've mentioned many of these things throughout the presentation, and I guess what I wanted to highlight is that it seems that through the COVID, nature and outdoor tourism will increase in popularity, and some of the measures to demarket and rebrand the most popular destinations should be made. Off-season travel should be promoted, especially since many of us are working on the home office and have more flexible time. Um, so possibly some of the countries could allow people to travel in a safe way during the off-peak times and so on. So traveling in smaller groups will be definitely the future because families will travel in smaller groups and not on organized travel. But again, we will see what the development of the pandemic around the world will bring, and hopefully, even if the virus stays with us for the times to come, the vaccines would be effective and that the tourism impacts would be managed and mitigated in a better way. So this is just our last slide, and it looks empty from this picture which I took in Yunnan in August, but actually the Serpentine Road goes down, and there were like about 15 of those buses down the road from the place where I took this picture. So people do travel, and people do travel outdoors again, especially in the countries where the pandemic situation is more controlled. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Yana, for presenting your talk. Could you please minimize the slide? Thank you very much. Despite the fact we had serious network trouble, but thanks to the slide that we had the slides, so we could understood that what you are trying to describe. But nevertheless, we got the message from your presentation. So I would like to ask Professor Dr. Sultanul Aziz to add some remark on this presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I missed a lot of the verbal presentation, but since I have extensively traveled in China and was taken by tour guides to a lot of fantastic places and also other places that she mentioned internationally, I was very impressed wherever I went with the capacity of the people, Chinese, perfect English, taking international crowd to a variety of places and explain everything, answer questions. And I think they have a very nice tourism industry set up in China. From my maybe 14 or 15 trips to 10 or 10 different countries, including Hainan. I was there twice. And Haikou at that time was the second cleanest city in the world. And I think it still is at the very top. And you showed some fantastic slides. One request I would have, if our university, Yusuf can follow it up, have a manuscript, if it is available for our library or in the tourism department. I think we shall benefit from that. Thank you very much for a nice presentation. I wish the internet was more friendly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Aziz. We have some question, but I will ask the audience to make a very brief questions, as we have our next speaker on board with us. So we will take just 2 questions. I have Imran Hussain, right? Yes, Imran. Imran, could you please
Yes,
ask your question?
it's an honorable to ask you a question, Professor Yana. I would like to ask you a question like, do you think countries do not receive enough tourists at this moment and should think on over tourism in advance? And how you dealing with over tourism in this pandemic situation?
Um,
Kiki talk
Thank you very much. I'm not quite sure if I heard everything, but I guess the first part of the question is about whether anticipated over tourism can come to any destination, and I would say yes, this is possible if we just for a second forget about the virus. The tourism numbers were growing in the last 30, 40 years. So I guess from the human behavior, people will travel, but the question is who will travel, how, and how much it will cost. But considering that many countries are still not able to travel this year, I guess the domestic tourism, as it's happening already in many places around the world,